Good afternoon, good evening, dear students, dear audience outside of the faculty. We are very happy to start our new series with real Norwegian architects sitting here with us at the floor of the Faculty of Architecture and Design. Reflections on Architecture is a project that is part of the Empathy in Art project, which is supported by Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Norway through the EEA Grants. Today, we have the pleasure to welcome here our dear guest, architect Martin Beverfjord. Martin, welcome.
Thank you.
From the office REVER DRAGE. And I already introduced very briefly the office during the last lecture last Monday, so I will not talk much or even not talk today about their work because the floor should be given to Martin, and he will introduce their work and their office and their conceptions behind the project. So I will now give you the floor, and we will start to share the screen.
Okay. Hello to everyone. Thank you all for having me. I would of course have appreciated to see you all here. I am here in beautiful Bratislava, fortunate for me. And I'm of course pleased to meet some of the staff here at the university, and we'll make the best of it online. I hope also that we can have some discussion about how things are in Norway and maybe see some similarities and differences between Slovakia and Norway if you would like to ask about that. I'll try to give you some of my reflections on our common field, architecture. And by that, I mean indicating how we work, what we are concerned about when working, and maybe also what kind of problems or challenges that we face in our work. Okay, we'll see. First up, as we all know, architecture can be beautiful and poetic, and we as architects, all of us, tend to be dreamers. We are trained to be dreamers from the start in the university, and then we may meet something else on the building site. It is not always as glamorous as it might be on the office, and it might be a harsh contrast from the beautiful dream in the architect office, and then you start like this. Many projects will start in the mud, and we try to meet that by being pragmatic about how dreamy we should be about projects. First of all, we always try to think, how can this be built? And we must also make something that the client can afford. So instead of dreaming too much and then getting disappointed, we try to be pragmatic about it and maybe even go with the current at times. And it is our experience that attitude can make the project go very far, because you're not crushed in the moment you start to build. Being architects in Norway is also about being a lot on the building site and talking to people in the excavator, people who are carpenters, people who do the working. So we try to be there as much as possible, and we can see that if we are drawing too much and not talking enough with those who are doing the building, then the buildings will not be like we want them to be. Those two people on the picture here are actually my colleagues. So this is a picture from 2010. At that time, we did build some projects ourselves. So we worked as carpenters as well as architects at the same time. It was not because nobody wanted to build our buildings, but it was because we wanted to learn how buildings are made. When necessary, and if we can, we also go to the woods with forest people and try to find special parts for buildings. That is not always necessary, but when it is important to find special parts that can do special construction tasks. Here we see two grown knees. That is the part of the tree, the part of the trunk that meets the root. So they are at a 90 degrees angle, if you can see that on the uppermost trunk there. So they're being used for bracings, a kind of combination of support and bracing. That is, of course, exciting to be out there with those who are experts on trees and wood constructions and going around in the forest and finding the best suitable materials. And also at the building site, try to do some of the work together with the construction workers when we can and when we need to. We see that there are fewer mistakes done, and we don't have to do as much drawing as we otherwise would have to. Sometimes you get disappointed on the building site because the construction workers have not even seen on the drawing. So you have to do it or explain it from scratch. And then it's easier to get the respect as an architect if you know how it's done. Of course, we are also a lot in the office, and another way of being pragmatic is to be concrete about ideas, and I mean concrete as in specific. So as soon as we have an idea, we try to express that in a model or a drawing and not talking too much about it when it's just an abstract thought. The good thing about that is that we are sure that we are talking about the same thing. If we spend a day talking about something abstract and then make a model, it might turn out that we were not talking about the same thing at all. So it's a way to get rid of all these obstructions that you get when you're just thinking about stuff. The dangerous or scary part of this is that when you are being concrete about things, they often turn out to be ugly or seem bad. So that's always jump you have to do, and not be afraid of the first idea or the look of it, because you have to put it on the table, or at least we think that's a good idea. Put it on the table, talk about it, and develop it further, and not be afraid of the ugliness or the badness of the start of it. Another thing here is that we experience that if you have 100 ideas, then maybe one of them is good. If you only have one or two, then they are seldom really good. So there is a quantity, it's important with the quantity of it, to bring as much ideas as possible on the table. It's something that we try to live by. I understand that you here on this university earlier have been focusing somewhat on writing about architecture. The good thing about that, in my view, is that it makes you aware that there is a communication going on, that you're always communicating with someone. And as architects, I think that we have a special responsibility, and even we are in a special position to doing the communication and making sure that people are understanding what we want. That is not always easy, because we are often communicating ideas to people who are not architects. And we do believe that it's important not to use the tribal architect language, but try to express this in easy to understand language, or language that the receiver is able to understand. The project that we are looking on here has many layers to us as architects, but to get it done, it was easy. It was really important to communicate two main aspects. First, to the entrepreneur or to the building workers, we communicated a simple sketch. It was like this, with 4 different constructions or 4 different buildings. This was on a level that the entrepreneur understood immediately, and the final result was not so far from this first sketch because of that, because it was an easy concept to understand. And we do, as architects, often make highly advanced concepts, which are sometimes necessary, and sometimes maybe we are getting lost in our own thoughts. But we try to separate what kind of concepts that are important internally or in our office between architects, and what kind of concepts that are possible to communicate to others. This building was built for family that were a lot outside, and if I go back, you can see the garage on the right-hand side, or the end with the lights. And this came out to be a really important room for them to take on and off all the equipment that you have to put on to go out in the Norwegian winter or the Norwegian autumn rain. This is high up in the mountains as well. And the other aspect that we had to communicate to get the building done was about, not just about that room, but about this strangeness of the building, conceivably, because the client was positive, but was afraid to be a weirdo and have other people laugh at them. Some people are up for something weird, most people are not. So we try to help them with that, to show them some historical photographs. I'm sorry, I have to skip a bit here. Here. Show them some historical photographs from this area, which they could show to their neighbors and their friends and their family. This is not so strange after all. We've been doing buildings like this in this area for 200 years, 300 years. And then they really came to rest. So here's the client, at least one of them from that family, and she finally, she fell in love with the building from the first, but she was a bit nervous about being the strange woman in the street. Here you can see the construction model that we also made. This is from the other aspect, communicating with the carpenters, which they actually understood immediately, but we also made this to go through every joint and every kind of construction. And this we did together with the carpenters, and that close communication and close cooperation is important for us. Sorry about the skipping here, back and forth. So, something that is not so beautiful is that every building project has a bit of a power play, or a play between different, you might even say a power struggle between different players. Do not get me wrong here. We do believe in cooperation and good relations, but there is a tension to any building project, especially in the start, before good relations are being made. And in this anarchy in the start of projects, you meet all kind of players, economy people, construction engineers, the law, bureaucracy. And in this power struggle, we experience that there are some knowledge that is hard punching and some other knowledge that is, unfortunately, soft targets in this fight that might happen. Typically, if you know something about economy or law or construction as an architect, you have more hard punches. If you only are being poetic, that is of course good for the project, but you may find yourself being a soft target and washed away by some of the other heavy punchers. In this project, we met especially many-headed bureaucracy, which was in the end being constructive and playing along, but we had to do all kinds of maneuvering or pleasing or meeting up with people to discuss and use language, use economics, use the law. Knowing about all these subjects is not something that at least we learned in university. So we have been doing our best and reading other subjects as well in our spare time. typical building meet at the start of a project. You meet some workers, you meet some investors, you might meet someone from the government, and they are all players with different interests and different language. And in the end, it might be a good concert where everybody is playing the same tune, but at start it always feels like anarchy. The last obstacle in this was a rare bird that was living by the river here. We had a nest, so we had to save that bird before we could have it built. And it feels comical at times because there are so many different aspects and players and so many struggles that we were not aware of before we started to put up buildings. This is the entrance. This is, sorry, I didn't say that. This is a museum or visitor center, actually, for stairs for salmon. There's a big waterfall here where the salmon cannot come up, so they have built some stairs inside the mountain so the salmon can pass the waterfall, and this is the visitor center on top of that. And we are, of course, happy about it in the end, and we tend to forget all the struggle. There is a debate in Norway these days, maybe also here, about why all the modern architecture is so ugly. And it tends to be not so nuanced. It's really harsh language, and maybe it must be like that because the public is the public. Someone just wants to build ornamented 19th century buildings, so they would love some parts of Bratislava, I can imagine. But in this debate, we sometimes take the side of the public and agree with them on the level that maybe we're not reaching out enough to people who are not architects and what kind of expressions they might need to relate to modern buildings. Of course, modern architecture is more than one thing. This is a single family house that we completed 2 years ago, and even though it's actually just a box in one way, it is made of a traditional log construction, and this building is storing about 110 tons of carbon. So that is not easy to see, but what makes it building that many people tend to like outside architect circles, I think has to do with the small or there is a level of ornamentation here that people can relate to, that has a human scale and shows that someone has cared for this building while they build it, I think. Here you can see the building while it's being built. It's on one side it's just a modernist box, but it also is a traditional wooden construction, resting on some concrete pillars. Inside, it has light and wooden and natural feel, and many people like that, of course. But I still believe in the ornamentation here, or the small reaching out with ornaments that is making this pop out like something not so typical maybe of modern architecture. And due to really good carpenters, there are some detailing here that we not always get, but is part of the ornaments and part of the, I think, lasting quality to this building. To the left, you can see the daylight going into the garage, and there is a trampoline in this room, and there's a small skateboard ramp, and the kids are playing down there every rainy day. On the back to the right, you can see the back of the building with the log joints and the window for getting not directly but indirectly sunlight in the mornings. So when you wake up, you see the sun hitting this surface and the log there in the window. The project also has a more standard or clear modernist touch in some of the interiors, which are more abstract and contrasting all this traditional wood joints. You can see the staircase to the right and one of the bathrooms to the left. It's kind of a small building. It's only 70 square meters in footprint. And the neighbors behind were also really glad because we put it on the side of the site so they didn't lose their view. All projects has a budget, of course. This is one that was rather extreme to us. The client here was a young couple. One of them was a student and the other one was just starting to work. So they almost didn't have any money at all. But they wanted to build a house, but they could only afford a small part of it. And then later on, they wanted the house to expand to house a big family. A lot of children was the plan. So we came up with this solution where we built the insulated part, which they could afford, which is to the left. And then we built a large roof and a dry area underneath it, which could function as a garage and a storage place and a place for garden parties. They also hunt deer, so when they have shot a deer, they hang it up there and let the blood spill down to the ground. And they can do all kinds of stuff being dry, which is a big quality in a place like Norway, where this is on the west coast, so there is a lot of rain. But the important thing here is, of course, that when they need more space or they have children, they have actually had one now, so they are ongoing. When they need a new function, they can occupy this void by one room after the other with exactly the functions that they need. They are planning a gaming room, probably to rest from the parenting, and this negative space, if you like, is a resource for them to fill with whatever the life is bringing them, or what they need. And it seems like it feels easy for them to do that because the roof is already there. So the difficult part is kind of done. To the left is just a kitchen downstairs and 2 rooms and a bathroom upstairs. They're also kind of charming in that it is the wife who is hunting deer, and the husband is really concerned about making everything cozy. So he's going around putting pillows everywhere and curtains and making it really nice and cozy place. Here's one of the first models we made for the roof, also in a budget concept-y way. We were planning to use the trees that were being shot down on the site and to keep them as columns. And there were 2 entrepreneurs in the picture at this time, and one of them wanted to do this, and the other one wanted to do the other way with the glue lam or some laminated timber, and it turned out to be the other one. This was a suggestion that we had, which was even cheaper. An intriguing aspect to that project that we just saw is that when completed, or when they have occupied all that void or extra space, the building might turn up like something like this, which is a completely traditional area-specific building in a time-reversing process, where you go from something cutting edge into something totally traditional in the end. And I understand that is the kind of concept that is, and the client couldn't care less about it, but to us as architects, it's absolutely something that we are fascinated by. Many of our inspirations come from an interest in construction or in history or in other of the classical aspects. An inspiration that is more random is something that you might call roadkills or country road architecture. It's what strikes you when you're driving along a road and you suddenly notice something intriguing or something that you get interested in as form. This is, of course, a vernacular building where nobody thought of it as aesthetics, but this building still exists, and I would call it kind of a second glance quality, that at first you may just see it as something ordinary, and then at a second glance you see that there has some quality to it. Here's another example, small single family house, which in its kind of interaction between boredom and intriguingness interests us. So an example of that is this, one of our last projects, which has taken up, or at least tried to take up some of those kind of qualities. From a distance, it seems just like an ordinary typical volume, and then there are some of those kind of roadside architecture aspects that are incorporated. For instance, you can see that the bracing, the beam, which is angled to the left, meet the concrete arch, but it also kind of holds the building towards the wind, which is from the right here. All the heavy wind come and hitting that shield wall, which is a traditional way of doing it, having a thick wall towards the wind. You can see to the right. So we are. These are aspects that are difficult to sell to clients. They tend not to be so interested, or they are concerned with other things, like where should they have their flowers, or what kind of paint should they have on their kitchen. So, but we of course try and sometimes succeed in bringing in different layers to buildings so that the client can see that this richness in perception from the first impression might be boring or just ordinary, and then there are some things that you get curious about, and if they also function as elements that give something practical to the building, for instance, the bracing to the left of the angled beam to the left here also holds the water pipe, so there it's leading the water away from the building. Sometimes architecture is entertainment, and that's okay. Sometimes the entertainment might be a means to achieve something. Other times the entertainment might be a goal in itself. This here is a small building that we did for the Norwegian national tourist roads. It contains some toilets and some technical rooms. It's going to be, or it has been placed by the Atlantic Ocean, so it has some harsh weather conditions with a lot of salt in the air. So we ended up making a shipyard build it in aluminium. So it is built like a fishing vessel. It is the triangular shape, which you can see in the middle of the picture, being lifted onto to a raft after it has been prefabricated in the shipyard. The entertaining aspect to this was, in fact, in the end, the way that the shipyard chose to transport it to the building site. Due to some winding roads and tunnels, the shipyard wanted to transport it on a raft. And to do that, they had to tow it through some of the worst part of the Norwegian coast, where there are thousands of shipwrecks, and every year there are big boats going down here. And to do it, they had to wait for 3 days with consecutive eastern winds for the water to be still enough. And then they used 26 hours and towed it with 3 different towboats and an excavator to get it ashore. So what we fondly understood, this was almost like D-Day in World War II, except no shooting, of course. But it was like an amphibious military operation. And we were kind of stressed about it because we thought we had made a lot of fuss for a small building, but everyone involved, including those living nearby, which came to look, were really excited about everything here, and they loved all the fuss about it. And it became clear that this narrative of creation was maybe the most important thing in the end for those who participated and those who lived nearby. So this is the building when it's in its final resting place. And you could see that those involved who were skeptical to this, for them, modern or strange expression, they became really fond of the building because of the entertaining value of the transport. When you cook, there is a certain pleasure to being able to use leftovers from your fridge to cook a new meal, at least if it's tasting good in the end. And that can be the case as well with architecture. Sometimes you can use parts of the building instead of tearing it down and filling on with the new parts. Other times you can take old parts and build a new building from scratch. Here you can see the old stone foundation. Here is from the 18th century, and the brown cladding there is from the 1960s, and there is one window which is 20 years old and two that are more recent. This building is made as a collage. It used to be an old house, but now it's like a cabin for a family. This was also made really cheap because we used so many leftovers. The important aspect of the leftover design, I would say, is that you cannot just smash stuff together and hope for the best. It must have some designed and cared for quality in the end. There is also, of course, something you get for free with old materials and old parts. Parts can be walls and roofs and all that, but you get at best, or you may get a good a quality that is not possible to get with only new materials. You may have the tactility of it, the smell of it, the visual qualities, and a lot of the time we also take old building parts and we sew them up again and make new planks out of old trunks, for instance. But they keep their old quality with them, even though they're being made fresh. This is another building that we also made from many different old buildings. There are parts here from a church, from a pigsty or a pig barn, from a boathouse from the 1750s. Here you can also see the knee that I talked about earlier up here, which is part column and part bracing. It's about the stiffness of the building. Those were from 1752, I think. And they were rotten in the lower parts, so we had to amputate and put on a new joint at the bottom. But this is, I think, 7 or 8 different buildings combined into one new. It's a boathouse for a museum. As architects, we tend towards the low-tech end of fighting climate change. For us, that is because those aspects are things that we can do something about as architects. There are other people that can tell us about what kind of solar panels to put on the roof or what kind of smart system for controlling all your electronic devices and so on. But as architects, we can do something about, of course, how we place the building on the site and how to use daylight and all that. In addition to that, we use this short list of things that always helps when it comes to leaving a less carbon footprint, for instance. Build smaller is something that we almost all the time suggest for customers or clients. Clients tend to want to build bigger, at least until they get the bill or see the costs of the building. And we try to keep them in the small because then we can afford good. But if they force us to make it big, it will at worst become big and bad. So we try to make it small and good instead. These are not breathtaking news, I can imagine, but still it's a good list to keep for us. Build smaller. That's maybe the easiest way to fight climate change as an architect, or even sometimes not build at all, of course, but that's bad for business. So we are in our office now. We are about 41 years old. That is, we're not young and fresh anymore, but somewhere in the middle. And we see that there are at least 2 main rules to the game. First, we try not to make things worse. That's the first rule. And the second rule is, if we can, we try to make it better. And if everything else is failing in the project, we try to make it humane, try to make it a good place for people to be. Some nice place to drink your morning coffee, at least. And then we at least have something to show for all the fuss. So on that note, I think I shall conclude for now. And I hope you have some questions or objections to that.
Absolutely, thank you very much. We can give you one more
Okay, we are enjoying very much to have a live guest.
Perhaps we can go again, like there are more of us here. Okay, I hope you will have many questions, dear students. As usually, we start with some our questions to encourage you a little bit. I was wondering, when you've been talking about these leftovers, actually, where you gather the pieces? Like it's always that you use only that what you find on a building site, or you have a special, let's say, store of leftovers from different sites all over the Norway, or how,
Or a very good supplier.
yeah, how it works actually.
Of course, the most available leftovers are those from the start in the building site. So if you start with an old building, instead of tearing it down or throwing it away, you see if there is anything that you can use further on. Then there are also a lot of people tearing down buildings and giving away things for free. So you can come and pick up a roofing or some kind of material. If you, for instance, bother to take out all the nails, you will have a lot of free materials. That is, of course, expensive, but if the customer wants to do it, use their children to do it, for instance, or as a family business.
Children labor, I don't know if it's legal.
Just call it family time.
Okay.
Well, killing a deer is a family time, apparently.
So that's some ways, and then also there is a lot of things being sold online, all kinds of windows and building materials. Also, some of the factories have parts that there are something wrong with, so you can get them for free or at least at a discount, so they're not thrown away. And a last resort is midsummer. There are big bonfires in Norway, maybe even here, where people are.
Not really, but we heard about yours.
Yeah, so they're burning all the stuff that they don't want anymore.
Okay.
Old boats and old refrigerators, or
Like
not that
big national cleaning.
kind of. I think it's a traditional. What do we have to get rid of? So there you can find also lots of material and parts. That's kind of a last resort.
Okay, but actually this is a part of strategy. So you have to, like you have to have it always in your mind that okay, there is something that we might use.
Yeah, and if you
like permanent thinking about this.
Yeah, absolutely, and also being flexible, because if you were planning to use stone on the roof and you see that the neighbor have some steel plates lying there, then you can, if you are able to change the project as you go, then you can also use much more leftovers.
And how carefully you plan the drawings with those leftovers? Do you measure them or do you document?
Or is it like improvisation on the side?
Or do you leave it on the carpenters, or how much energy spent on the detailing them with the leftovers?
Yeah, that's important, because if we have spent a lot of time on the detailing, then it's not so easy to give that away, because we have used a lot of time and money on that. So you kind of get more rigid in a way, or narrow. But if you have just drawn kind of a overview almost, then you can be a lot more flexible. And we understand that if you are building an airport, you cannot have this attitude towards it, because there are, of course, other demands for documentation and testing and all that. But in single-family houses and cabins, and even some of the a bit larger projects, where you can do this. And even in an airport, you can, of course, actually say, can we use this for something instead of, for instance, a big part of the cost is the ground that you have to shift. Take away the old stuff and bring in something new.
The excavation.
Yeah, excavation, exactly. And if you can use that for something, instead of first transporting all that ground away and then putting in something new, you have reduced your budget significantly.
So it's actually a kind of recycling on the building site or
Absolutely, yeah. And
building industry.
yeah. And if you have these
Like changing
classes
the
on-
process of how we
This is
usually
really
get the materials and everything. But Martin, because I really like that your lecture was very like down to earth, like very practical. But I still think that there is like some sort of like deeper thinking behind what you do, because it's not just simple recycling, and as you said, like you can't just like put different things together and hope for the best, but like some of the designs were completely elaborated, like the one with the void created for the future filling up. Like how did you get to the very expressive shape of that structure that was holding the roof, for example?
Yeah, in that case, I think the budget was an asset. It helped us because we had to make something so cheap. We were kind of allowed to be radical, because if they had more money, maybe we were not allowed to build something that expressive. And the reason for the exact shape there was we made two different construction drawings. One was with the oak trees, and the other one was with the angled glue lamp, or this laminated wood. Yeah. So they are the ones who are making the triangular shapes. There are beams going like that all the way in the construction. So it was two different ways to carry the roof with as few points of foundation as possible. And then if they are building the building complete, you will at some point see those beams going through the windows on an angle.
Oh, okay. So the construction will stay there even once they will fill the void.
Yeah.
Okay.
There are some Gothic churches, for instance, Gloucester Cathedral in England, where you can see this Gothic arch, and then some of the cantilevers going through it.
Sort of like something that you would call an imperfection, but it's actually a perfection because it shows you the process
I would say
of how it was built or something.
Yeah, I would like that. At least if you think of those imperfections as personalities.
Well, there is definitely a lot of character in your work, in every single thing that we've seen today.
Absolutely. Do we have already?
We have. Okay. We were chatting, but the students are asking. So I will just read it aloud for you. Katarina is asking, your architecture has a lot of craft details. Do you have enough quality carpenters in Norway? Because they are missing in Slovakia, and it's a big problem here.
I think most of the building industry has not actually craftsmanship, but only people who are putting things up, like monteurs, or and it must be boring to be construction worker these days, because you're not supposed to think, you're just supposed to
put together
something which is defined from the start. To avoid this, we team up with the few traditional workers who are still left, and I often work with museums and restorations, and I'm sure you have that in Slovakia to a bit still as well.
This is really like a small part of
Very precious people.
But they are also really interested in building new buildings. So when we try to build this bridge from that traditional museum world and showing them that we can take all that quality and put it into a modern expression, then they have been really interested in that. And to us, it also seems that people who are that skilled in their work, they are the most flexible because they are not locked down in one way of thinking. They are used
They
to
have the creative mind.
Yeah, actually, they are used to thinking dynamic about everything, and much more free and positive and open-minded than I could imagine when going into that traditional world of museums and traditional workers.
That is actually a kind of contradiction because I read everywhere that okay, in Norway we have a strong wood or building in wood tradition, but actually we are not. I'm thinking about the Norwegian discussion that there is not really a kind of continuity. The tradition and the house, and you actually say it in a very similar way. That do you think that this is because it became a part of industrialization, that the wood is part of this industrial production of wooden structures?
Yeah,
This was
absolutely. And before 1950 or something, maybe 1960, all the houses in Norway were built by skilled workers.
Yeah.
And after that, we changed to the it's actually an American system with the 60 centimeters between everything and stop thinking, just put it up as cheap as possible. So there is absolutely a lost generation or two after that.
but it's recovering now, or not really?
I'm not sure how much people are willing to pay for that. But if we, for instance, start to buy wood out of density, how heavy the wood is, instead of how much volume it is, then you will have a lot more quality in it. Today we are just buying wood out of volume, and then people who have forest, they would like the forest to grow as fast as possible, almost making paper wood, which is not lasting. So this is a really difficult game to change, I think, but if you can get it more over towards things that has to last, then you also need the skilled workers, and then there will be a need for that kind of expertise. So that's the hope. That's the good side of the climate changing.
That we have to think about this again.
Yeah.
And
A lot of questions.
Yes.
there.
Another one is also dealing with the wood. So Zehra says we have seen especially the details of wooden joints because you have shown a lot of details. Do you see the benefit of these in the construction process, such as making it easier for carpenters and speeding up the process? So I guess he means that if you are actually designing the joints, or if you are leaving the craftsmen and the carpenters to do the joints, like invent the joints themselves.
We do both, and we try to judge in every project how much must we detail things and how much can we leave to the carpenters and how much do we trust them, and when is it important to let them do their thing, and when is it important to constrain them a bit so that all the good stuff is not just disappearing into a jungle of construction. But besides doing the drawing, we try to make as much modeling as possible in 1:5 or 1:2 or 1:1, so we can take the actual parts with the actual materials, show them to the carpenters or to the workers. This is how we want it to be. Then there are not so many mistakes in the building sites.
Sure. Another question by Christina is dealing with more about with what she said in the beginning. You mentioned that instead of dreaming and getting disappointed later, it's better to be pragmatic and specific. Where do you think the optimal line between the artistic and the rational components lies? Do you consider those aspects to be equal, like the rational and the artistic?
I think, of course, that we still shall dream, and we have the responsibility to make buildings that are something more than just a place to be dry and warm. But if we miss out on the important stuff, then we're not allowed to lift it higher in a way. So we see that if you, in a way, dream small or aim small, at least you miss small. So we see all the time architects that have great visions for things, and then it just collapses, and it ends up with something that is worth nothing. And that then you get, I can imagine, really depressed as an architect, because you saw how beautiful and good this could be, and then nothing came of it. So at least it works for us to be a bit lower in the start, maybe realistic, and then try to end up in as high a place possible, both in the artistic sense, but also in functioning and making sure that most people involved are kind of sharing the same vision, not just something that we try to implement on people who don't understand anything or
like it's very individualistic personality.
And it is nice. It's a kind of a acceleration strategy.
Yeah, and it's, I don't know, it's not. Sometimes, of course, you have kind of undercover plans, or you want to bring in something else, but you understand that you cannot talk about this now, because you have to make sure that the excavator is doing its job, and then the next and the next. So everything is kind of fitting to where you are in the project, and then we can have some secret plans for beauty and poetry.
So you put it on the table when all the people are already so much involved that they cannot say no,
yeah.
that they really love the job and they are looking forward to the final result.
That is true, because when people have started to move in a direction, it's much easier they are open.
You don't need to push them so much.
I think you're doing a very good job in the communication between different people. You've been talking about it a lot. And so do you think that those sort of disappointments of dreaming big, they come from not having enough knowledge about the construction, or you sort of explained it,
maybe.
not being realistic.
But it might also be that we get so excited as architects, and we see the beauty of it and how good it can be, and we just want everyone else to see the same. And then you are kind of forgetting that they haven't been through your journey with the project, or all your thoughts and everything that we have in our heads. They have nothing. They have just heard you saying something that they didn't understand at worst.
Yeah.
So it's kind of taking that perspective a lot, and being serious about that, because most people are not architects.
Yeah, but it's somehow it's connected with the as you've been talking about the craftsman. that actually we would like to have all the people somehow enthusiastic about their own work or their own profession. When they're already on the side, they're somehow over-relaxed. It's really hard to work with them, definitely.
I'm not sure about the next question, but maybe you'll be willing to answer. Kino is asking, you said that we should use simple sketches to explain the concept of your design, but when we do those sketches, it seems that we are not professional. It looks like it was made by a child. This may not give your client enough confidence. How do you convince your customers that you have enough experienced knowledge?
That you are not a child.
Yeah, exactly. And that is, of course, important. Appearance is important, and you have to kind of judge your audience. Is this somebody who can manage that kind of child drawing, or do they have to see something that is more professional, if you like? So every situation is new, but you must judge, and it doesn't have to be a sketch. It can also be words. It can be a model. It can be anything that makes the person understand what you're trying to do, as simple as possible. But absolutely, especially in the beginning, before the relations are good and before there is trust between the players, then the appearance is important. And it is also because people are paying a lot of money for this, and they want to be comforted, or they have to be sure that this is going to be something good in the end. And then they will, of course, fall off the chair if you come only with a children's drawing and say, this is how it's going to be.
But
So,
I'm sure that for them it's something much more comprehensible than like giving them very, very complicated like drawings in the beginning or like some details.
And that was for the entrepreneur. So they saw and we had
yes, it wasn't even for the client, it was for the
entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So they saw the practical part of it and understood immediately how this was going to be. But the client, they of course had to see renderings or models from how the interior rooms were going to be, and much more. But even clients are different people. Some are really into the construction. Some are only understanding photography. So we can use Pinterest a lot, or images from other projects. So there is no one answer to that. But I think there is one right thing about this question, and it is that sometimes you have to put on that professional coating of it.
Another question by Maria. How can a young architecture student overcome fears of first orders and rejections? Because a lot of simple sketches and ideas in the style of a simple construction quite often get not very positive responses.
Yeah, it's a big question, and building on the last answer, I can only say that you have to understand what is important for the specific customer or the client. What are they into, and what kind of communication do they manage, or are they able to, what kind of things are they able to understand? And a lot of the time it's maybe not that difficult, but you have to kind of hit the nerve with the client, something that they really care about. And if you miss on that, you can show all the renderings and models and drawings you want, and it will be for deaf ears because their mind is somewhere else. So being a bit of a psychologist there and trying to get into the mind of the customer, I think that's important work. And you can also be a bit CIA about that. Try to pick up some information, ask their children or their neighbors or their parents. Do a good background study of your client. I think that's a good idea. Don't get caught.
I just remembered when it was the year of Czech architects having the lectures, and one of them said that whenever he starts to work on the family house, he asked the clients to write the essays, like both usually it's a husband and the wife, or like man and woman living together. So he asked like both of them, or even when they have kids, like each person has to write an essay on how I would like my house to be. And he said that it's always very, very funny and entertaining to read them, and sometimes they are the complete opposite. And but all of them said that it's very, very difficult to actually write down those thoughts on how they want their house to be. It's a hard task for the customer.
Yeah, and it's smart because you involve the customer in the project and they get ownership to the product that way. And of course you also see that there are maybe they don't agree on everything, and so you have to be a bit of a marriage counseling person as well.
Yeah, of course. I don't know if we have.
Yeah, there is one more by Alexandra. She says, I have a similar question as Christina. Is the ecological aspect more important to you than the artistic value of the work?
Yeah, in the end of the day, of course, nothing is more important than saving the earth. But we first of all, we use our vote and vote for parties that are for saving the earth. That's probably the most important thing any one of us can do, more important than using wood or concrete. But we try to use the short list that you saw on the end of the presentation. That is something that we can control and understand as architects. It's also something that we are more or less sure about, because it soon gets really complicated when you're trying to be carbon neutral or whatever you call it. But those are easy measures which we can understand and the customer can understand. So by that, we still try to put a smile on the customer's face, and we try to make buildings that are, of course, as nice as possible. And so the artistic part of it, in that sense, is absolutely important to us. And we don't believe that the answer to being ecological is that every building should be boring.
Yeah, I think she meant like, would you sacrifice the ecological aspect to like fulfill the sort of idea that you had in the beginning, or it can't happen because it's always hand in hand?
If I had to choose, I would go for saving the earth.
Okay.
But I would like to continue in this kind of talk, because there is this huge phenomenon of national touristic roads, and you showed us this touristic center which you built on the near the waterfalls, or I don't know if it's really waterfall, but yeah. And so I'm a little bit like I'm wondering if there is another kind of contradiction, that this is this big exploitation actually of nature, bringing more tourists, and this very distant as you show it with this small cabin. This is a kind of distant, strange place where probably nobody would go, but we attract with our architecture those people to go there. And I don't know if it's really good for the nature. So I feel it a little bit like contradictory.
Absolutely, it is,
Yeah,
and
okay.
it's problematic. So there are different nuances to this as well, because where there are already roads, the imprint on nature is not that big if you put up a toilet building or something. If you build, which is a big problem in Norway these days, big fields of cabins in the mountains. For everyone living in the city, everybody wants their cabin, and then you have to build a lot of infrastructure, and there will be no wilderness left. So I think that is the part where you should start. Try to compress those cabin areas. And when it comes to building stuff in nature, that can work rather well if you do it like a lighthouse or a stony bridge or something that is obviously man-made, but there are enough nature around it that it will not destroy everything. So there is it's important with the quantity about the wild landscape around things, because today, at least in the southern parts of Norway, there is almost non-big areas left, as I can imagine in Slovakia as well.
Yeah, exactly. This is why, because we have quite a huge debate on this, if we still are allowed to build in a mountains, for example.
Yeah.
But I think it's very different, like, if you build a tiny structure, or if you build like
Well, of course, but I don't think that it's so different, because you are still interfering and you are still bringing more people there, and you need an infrastructure, as Martin put it. So, I mean, because when I was looking at all the offices we will have, each of them, they have done something on this touristic roads, that this is really kind of phenomenon.
Yeah.
It's not
like
an exception.
as we have the explosion of the viewpoint towers in Slovakia right now.
Yes, we have something similar.
And they are attracting so many people.
Looks like we are both a kind of hiking nations. Like,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah. And you also have a lot of woods and mountains, and then you get that kind of population.
Yeah, but I mean, we in Central Europe, we are like Austrians, and we already spoiled quite a lot of the nature. So I would say don't go this direction.
No, I think you're right.
You still have enough space, but
there you can use your title, the architecture, as entertainment, like in different interpretation. Because the first I thought you are going to speak about is that the architecture is the thing which attracts people, and it is the entertainment, not the building process itself. And this is the different layer of architecture, like how it should be used or shouldn't be there, or shouldn't we have architecture at all, like to enjoy the wilderness, the nature itself with a tent or something, like without any infrastructure. The nature is just the nature.
Yeah. Yeah. Building on this, we are doing a cabin area now, where you have to walk on foot to your cabin instead of driving by car. And then, of course, you have a totally different infrastructure in that, and we can see that more clients are asking for those kind of cabins as well. Maybe without water and maybe without electricity. So if that development continues, it's much easier to see that nature can be spared. And we also sometimes try to build things that will decay fast, so it can go back to earth. For example,
Like a bird nest.
yeah, something like that. For example, we made a gravestone out of wood some years ago, and that will be turned into earth in about 25 years. But I think this is a huge problem with leading everyone everywhere. But I'm not good enough in this area of planning, so I'm not sure how we can stop it. We can, of course, stop flying, so there will not be tourists everywhere. But,
Because this is always this discussion in Slovakia. Even if it is because one of these questions was about this, if it is really good architecture, but on the other hand, you have this impact on nature, so
yeah,
it's very difficult. It's crazy that we are in the situation when we need to consider this.
Yeah, and I can.
We went too far, simply.
No, but it might be difficult for an architect. We get commission. Here you can come and design a beautiful object or do whatever you like. It's difficult to say no to that, to turn that down, especially when you are young and you cannot choose everything. So that will also always be difficult, but I guess the question is spot on, and we should, of course, choose what's best for the climate.
Yeah, definitely. I think we do not have any questions from students' side, but I promise you that I have this one question concerning name of your office, which is REVER and DRAGE. So what is the story behind it? Because your name is not REVER nor DRAGE.
No, my name is almost REVER. It's Beverfjord. But we, as students, we started the firm. We built our first project, and we needed a name in the register. So it was after a really short workshop, we came up with that name. It was our names shortened and kind of diverged, and the first person we told it to really liked it immediately, and it was easy to sell in a way, so we stuck with that. It has a kind of a fairy tale connotation to it, which also works for our advance, meaning foxes and dragon. So there is a bit of European fairy tales and a bit of Chinese, Japanese in that.
It also looks like a smart and strong fox and dragon.
Yeah, exactly. Strong and stupid and smart and weak.
I'm sure it makes it easy to remember and like to distinguish you at the local scene. Like you're probably famous because of that name.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, we don't have any more questions, but I think we have.
There is one more.
There is one more.
Zuzana is asking, what do you think that makes your studio different than other studios in Norway?
Fox and dragon.
I think that everything you just said was sort of a big explanation.
Yeah, but perhaps.
Probably we are equal on many things. Also, of course, to you architects here in Slovakia everywhere, but at least we try to be down to earth, be interested in all kinds of people, not try to be too artsy about talking about architecture, without, of course, losing all the beauty and poetry in it. But I guess you can judge for yourself after you have heard 5 other offices.
We will put this question at the end of the series. Then.
Yeah.
But I mean, this was a very beautiful conclusion after all. So
Yes.
thank you, Martin, very much for the presentation, for the beautiful ideas that you presented here, and I mean, very, I would say, important ideas, because I mean, architects at the present time should first of all be a kind of let's say, a man or woman to advertise an ethical approach to work and towards our world, actually, because this is really something which is going to be very, very important, or it is already very. So thank you very much.